Divorce turned nightmare when my dad's identity was stolen by someone close family at its peak. So, my dad, Alan, 57, is in the middle of a divorce from my mom. They've been together for 30 years, but things fell apart fast once she found out he wanted to retire early and move states. She wasn't ready for that life, and instead of talking it through, everything just blew up. Anyway, here's where it gets messy. Divorce proceedings are already held, right? Lawyers, paperwork, court dates, it's draining. But then something insane happened. My dad got a letter from the bank saying his loan application had been denied. Except he hadn't applied for any loan. At first, he thought it was some clerical mistake. But then 2 days later, his credit card got maxed out on online purchases he never made. That's the type who still balances his checkbook with a pen and calculator, so he noticed right away. He called the bank furious. Thank rep, Mr. Allen, are you sure you didn't apply for the car lease last month? It matches your SSN and address. That's snapping. I'm in the middle of a divorce, and the last thing I'm doing is buying a damn car. That's not me. That's when the rep said something chilling. Whoever did this had all of Dad's info. His social security number, birthday, work history, the works. It wasn't just some random scammer. This was someone close. The first person Dad suspected? My mom. But here's the twist, it wasn't her. Turns out it was my Uncle Paul Mom's brother. We found out because the bank flagged one of the applications where he had accidentally listed his own phone number as a secondary contact. Idiot move. But that was the breadcrumb we needed. When Dad confronted Mom about it, she lost it. Mom, don't you dare accuse my brother. He would never. Dad, his phone number was on the damn application. Carol, don't play dumb. That night turned into one of the ugliest screaming matches I've ever witnessed. My sister Emily, 25, and I were stuck in the kitchen just listening, both of us completely shocked. My mom kept defending Paul like her life depended on it, while Dad kept demanding answers. The real gut punch. We learned Paul had been helping Mom with the divorce paperwork. He had access to all Dad's personal documents because Mom trusted him to organise things. Basically, she had handed over Dad's entire identity on a silver platter. I don't think I've ever seen my dad so betrayed. His voice broke when he said, "It's one thing to lose a wife, Carol, it's another thing to lose myself." That line still hits me in the chest. The next day, Dad called his lawyer and started documenting everything. But now the divorce wasn't just about splitting assets. It became a war about boundaries, trust, and stolen identity. And believe me, it only got worse from there. The morning after Dad found out about Paul, things escalated fast. His lawyer, Mr. Kaplan, was already neck deep in the divorce, but when Dad showed him the bank letters and the fraudulent credit card statements, Kaplan's jaw literally dropped. "Kaplan, Alan, this isn't just divorce anymore, this is criminal. We need to involve the court and possibly the police." "Dad, I don't want Paul in jail, I just want my life back." But here's the thing, once identity theft is involved, you don't really get a choice. Banks demand police reports to clear fraudulent debt, so Dad had to file a report. That's when the whole family started fracturing. Mom doubled down on defending Paul. She told everyone Dad was using the divorce to smear her family. At one point, she even cornered me in the living room and said, "You know your father's exaggerating. Paul would never steal. He's just helping me because I can't handle the paperwork." I just stared at her. Like, how blind do you have to be? Meanwhile, Emily and I started digging. We went through some of Dad's old files in the home office with his permission and realised whole folders were missing tax returns, insurance papers, even his passport copy. Gone. Dad always kept meticulous records, so there was no way he just lost them. Emily whispered, Mom had to have given them to him. The emotional toll on Dad was brutal. He already hated the divorce process, but now he felt stripped of control. He'd sit at the dining table, head in his hands, muttering, "They took everything I built and now they're taking me." Court was the next nightmare. During a hearing, Dad's lawyer brought up the identity theft. Kaplan tried to connect it to Mom since she allowed Paul access to private documents. The judge's eyebrows shot up. "Judge, Miss Carroll, did you authorise your brother to use these documents?" "Mom, I gave him permission to organise things, not to steal." But the damage was done. Her credibility tanked right there in front of everyone. Paul wasn't present, of course. He was sick that day, which felt like the most convenient flu in history. Afterward, we all met in the courthouse hallway. Mom pulled me aside, her eyes blazing. "You're taking your father's side in this, aren't you? You think your uncle's a thief?" I told her flat out, "Mom, his number was on the application. How do you explain that?" She didn't answer. She just stormed off, leaving Emily and me in the hallway with Dad, who looked like someone had kicked the last bit of air out of him. That night, he changed the locks on the house and started keeping his wallet, phone, and even his mail in a locked drawer in his bedroom. He said he didn't feel safe under his own roof anymore. And honestly, neither did I. Things got even messier when Paul finally had to show up. The court ordered him to appear for questioning about the fraudulent accounts. Dad had been holding back a mix of dread and anger for weeks, and now the moment of confrontation was unavoidable. The day Paul arrived at the courthouse, Dad's hands were trembling. He kept muttering, "I can't believe this. My own blood, my own family." Paul walked in, all smirky confidence, like nothing had ever happened. He waved at Mom, who just sat stiffly, avoiding Dad's gaze. Kaplan started with the facts. "Mr. Paul, these applications were filed using Alan's personal information without his knowledge. Care to explain?" Paul leaned back, fingers tapping on the table. "I was just helping Carol. She asked me to sort through Alan's stuff, and I may have filled out some forms, but it's not like I bought anything." Dad, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up, his voice low and shaking. "Not like you bought anything, Paul. You racked up thousands. I got denied for my own loan. My credit is trashed. I can't even get a car without being questioned for fraud, and you call that not buying anything." The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Mr. Paul, did you have authorization from Mr. Allen to use his identity in any capacity?" Paul froze. He glanced at Mom, who quickly shook her head. "No, Your Honour," he muttered. The courtroom went silent. Dad's face turned red with a mix of rage and disbelief. Emily and I were sitting in the gallery, gripping each other's hands so tightly my knuckles hurt. After a tense pause, Dad said something that cut deeper than any courtroom jab. "You didn't just violate my trust. You violated my life, my boundaries, everything I've worked for. You treated it like it didn't matter." The judge finally leaned forward. "Mr. Paul, this is a serious offence. Identity theft is criminal. We'll need a full investigation before the divorce and asset division can proceed." That hit Mom hard. Her face fell, and she looked like she was seeing for the first time the full consequences of what she allowed. After the hearing, Dad didn't speak much. He just held his head low, muttering about never trusting family again. Emily and I followed him to the parking lot. Emily whispered, "Do you think he'll ever forgive him?" Dad didn't answer at first. Then he shook his head slowly. "Forgive, maybe. Forget, never. You don't just let someone take your identity and your life without leaving scars." That night, we sat around the dining table, the house eerily quiet. The locks Dad had installed felt like the only thing protecting us from the chaos that had invaded our family. For the first time, I really understood what he meant by losing himself not just to divorce, but to the people who were supposed to protect him. And while the legal battle was far from over, something shifted that day. Dad wasn't broken. He was determined. Determined to reclaim his life, his identity, and his boundaries, no matter what. After the courtroom drama, things at home were tense, almost unbearable. Dad became hypervigilant. Every phone call, every email, every piece of mail was scrutinized like a crime scene. He even started carrying a notebook, logging every interaction with banks, lawyers, and family members. It was exhausting just watching him, but I could see the determination in his eyes. He wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of him again. Mom, on the other hand, grew colder. She barely spoke, and when she did, it was always defensive. Then it became a battleground of half-silent stares and passive-aggressive comments. At one point, she snapped at Emily. "You think you know everything about your father? Don't act like you're the hero here." Emily, normally sweet and calm, didn't hold back. "I just want him safe, Mom. He's being robbed of his life." I sat there silently, feeling the weight of being stuck in the middle. Every family gathering now felt like walking on broken glass. Meanwhile, the legal fallout was escalating. Kaplan filed an official complaint for identity theft against Paul, and the police started an investigation. They had to provide proof of every fraudulent transaction, every unauthorized application, and even testify about which documents had been stolen. It was grueling. One evening, after another long day of dealing with banks and lawyers, Dad finally broke down in the living room. He sank into his armchair, head in his hands. "I feel violated. It's not just the money, it's the trust, the boundaries, everything. How do you protect yourself when the people you love use your own life against you?" Emily and I just sat with him, offering silent support. Words didn't feel enough. Then came the turning point. Kaplan discovered an overlooked cause in the divorce proceedings. Since Mom had officially given Paul access to her legal documents, the court could hold her partially accountable for the damages. This meant she could be liable for some of Dad's financial losses. When Dad confronted her about it, her facade cracked. "I didn't think it would go this far," she yelled, tears streaming down her face. "You didn't think?" Dad shot back. "You handed my life over to someone else without asking me. My identity isn't a toy." At that moment, it was clear. The family we thought we knew was fractured beyond repair. Trust had been obliterated, and boundaries had been completely ignored. But strangely, there was a shift too. Dad started asserting himself more, setting hard rules about access to his personal information. He changed passwords, filed all his own documents, and even insisted that Kaplan handle any further interactions with her involving Mom or Paul. It wasn't revenge, it was reclaiming control. And though the road ahead was still messy, I saw a spark of pride in him. He wasn't letting the betrayal define him. That night, he pulled Emily and me aside. "I don't know if we can fix everything, but I can fix what's mine, and that starts with me, protecting myself always." For the first time in weeks, it felt like we were all on the same side. Not against each other, but against the chaos that had invaded our lives. The day of the final hearing arrived, and tension in the courtroom was practically electric. Dad, Emily, and I sat together in the gallery, while Mom and Paul sat across the room, both visibly uncomfortable. Paul kept fidgeting with his hands, and Mom refused to look anyone in the eye. Kaplan started by laying out the facts. He presented every piece of evidence, fraudulent credit applications, the bank letters, the police report, and most importantly, the proof that Paul had been given access to Dad's documents without his consent. "Judge, Mr. Paul, how do you plead to the accusations of identity theft?" Paul swallowed hard. I didn't realize it would cause so much trouble. I was helping. Dad, sitting stone-faced, finally spoke, his voice steady but cold. "Helping? You call destroying someone's life helping? You crossed every boundary a human being can have with someone they supposedly love." The judge nodded solemnly, turning to Mom. "Miss Carroll, did you knowingly allow your brother access to Mr. Allen's personal information?" Mom's lips trembled. I thought he was organizing things, not stealing." The courtroom murmured. Kaplan leaned in to whisper to Dad, "This is your chance to make them accountable, Alan. Don't hold back." And Dad did not. He outlined every impact of their actions, the ruined credit, the denied loan, the sleepless nights, the stress of fear of being financially exposed. Emily and I could see tears welling up in the judge's eyes. "Judge, it is clear that Mr. Paul's actions, facilitated in part by Mrs. Carroll's decisions, have caused substantial damage to Mr. Allen. This court will order restitution and strongly considers legal penalties against Mr. Paul for identity theft." Mom's face fell. She opened her mouth to protest, but the judge cut her off. "This court recognizes that family bonds do not grant the right to violate someone's identity or boundaries. Case adjourned pending full restitution and investigation." When we left the courtroom, Dad was quiet but visibly relieved. The weight that had been crushing him for weeks seemed to lift just slightly. He pulled Emily and me aside in the parking lot. "This doesn't erase the betrayal," he said, "but it's the first step in reclaiming my life. My boundaries are mine to protect, and no one, not family, not anyone can take that away again." That night at home, for the first time in weeks, we sat down for a calm dinner. Mom didn't join, she stayed in her room. Paul never returned. The house, which had felt like a battlefield, finally felt like a place where Dad could breathe. Emily whispered to me, "Do you think he'll ever fully trust them again?" I shook my head, smiling faintly. "Maybe not, but he's learning that trust doesn't mean giving away your life." Dad clinked his glass gently against ours. The boundaries, and never letting anyone take what's yours without permission. It was a small moment of victory, but a monumental one for Dad. The nightmare of stolen identity, boundary violations, and betrayal was not over, but he had taken back control of his life. And that was everything. After the courtroom victory, life slowly started to settle, though the scars were still there. Dad was quieter but calmer, spending more time in his study, reorganizing all his documents, securing accounts, and even teaching Emily and me about keeping personal information safe. It was almost like he was reclaiming pieces of himself that had been taken away. Mom, on the other hand, retreated completely. She didn't speak much, avoided eye contact, and largely confined herself to her bedroom. The house was quieter, but it carried a tension that didn't dissipate overnight. Dad made it clear he wasn't going to continue enabling her Paul in any way, and Mom seemed to realize she had lost control. One evening, Dad invited Emily and me to sit in the living room. He wanted to talk about what happened, not the legal stuff, but the emotional fallout. You know, he said, what hurts most isn't just the money or the stolen identity, it's that the people I trusted most, my family, thought they could cross my boundaries without consequence. That stings worse than anything else. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. It's not fair, Dad. You didn't deserve this. He smiled faintly, a tired but genuine smile. Fair doesn't always exist, but control does, and I finally understand that protecting myself is my responsibility, not theirs. Emily, normally soft-spoken, added, we've learned a lot from this, Dad, about trust, and about setting limits, and we're here with you. Dad looked at us, a mix of pride and gratitude in his eyes. That's all I need right now. Family doesn't mean giving up yourself, it means standing together, but not letting anyone step over your life. The next few weeks were a strange mix of normalcy and awkwardness. Mom avoided confrontation, and Paul stayed out of sight entirely. Dad started reconnecting with friends and colleagues he had neglected, reinforcing his support network outside of family drama. Slowly, life began to feel like it belonged to him again. One night, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, Dad said something that stuck with me. I've been through a lot in my 57 years, but this taught me more about boundaries and self-respect than anything else. No one gets to take who I am without facing the consequences, not even family. It wasn't just a lesson for him, it was a lesson for all of us. We realized that trust is fragile, and boundaries are sacred. And sometimes, reclaiming your life means making hard choices about the people around you. By the end of it all, Dad had regained control over his finances, his identity, and his peace of mind. The betrayal had left marks, but he emerged stronger, more cautious, and more self-assured. And for the first time in months, our home felt safe again, not because the danger was gone, but because Dad had taken back his power. Months passed, and the tension that had gripped our family finally loosened. Dad had rebuilt his life piece by piece, locks changed, accounts secured, documents organized. But more than that, he rebuilt his sense of self. He no longer felt like someone else could just waltz in and take control of his life. That was priceless. Mom was still in her room most of the time. She never admitted wrongdoing, but the courtroom and the police investigation had left its mark. Paul stayed away entirely. It was strange not having them in our daily lives, but for Dad, that distance was a relief. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Dad started talking about the lessons he had learned. His voice was calm and reflective. You know, what happened with Paul and your mom, it wasn't just about stolen identity. It was about boundaries. They didn't see them as real. I did, and now I know that I have to enforce them, no matter what. Emily, ever perceptive, nodded. And it's not just about keeping your stuff safe, Dad. It's about keeping yourself safe, emotionally too. I added quietly. It's also about knowing who's truly trustworthy. Dad smiled, a mix of pride and exhaustion. Exactly, trust is earned, not assumed, and family isn't always safe just because they're family. I have to respect myself first. There was a pause, a quiet moment of reflection. Then Dad leaned back and said something that stayed with me. I feel like I've gone through a storm and finally come out the other side, scarred, sure, but stronger. I can't change the past, but I can protect the future. We didn't talk about Mom or Paul much after that. They were part of the past now, a chapter in our lives that had caused pain but also taught us lessons we wouldn't forget. Dad started focusing on what mattered, rebuilding connections with friends, taking care of his health, and spending time with Emily and me. One afternoon, Dad invited me into his study to help organize some old photos. We laughed remembering old vacations, shared stories, and even teased each other. It felt normal, in a way it hadn't in months. As I left the room, Dad called out, remember, Lesia, boundaries aren't just about protecting your things, they are about protecting who you are. Never let anyone, family or not, take that from you. I paused at the doorway, nodding. I won't, Dad. That simple exchange summed up everything. The stolen identity, the betrayal, the legal battles, they all faded into the background, leaving one undeniable truth. Dad had reclaimed himself. And in doing so, he had reminded us all of the power of self-respect, boundaries, and resilience. Life wasn't perfect. The family was fractured, trust had been broken, and scars remained. But Dad had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And in that victory, quite personal and hard-earned, he had taken back the one thing no one could steal, his sense of self. For the first time in a long time, our family, just the three of us, felt safe, grounded, and ready to move forward.